ahead and get started. I think I just don't want to, I'm going to make sure, we are respectful of everybody's time here. So, well, thank you everyone for being here today. This is a joint effort between iScore RC and our Clinical Trials Toolkit here at West Virginia University with our Center of Excellence. So today we're going to be looking at inspection readiness. So we have our presenters. But as you all know, I always have my admin items to go over. First and foremost, if you do not have your name in your Zoom box, if you can, change it to your name, that would be very helpful. We do take attendance off of those names. If you can't, just put your name in the actual chat box for us. So that we can take attendance that way. You do not have to put your name or anything in the chat box. If your complete name is in your Zoom box, you're completely fine. The other admin items is that Michelle, Amy, and Annie are going to allow us to share their slides with everybody after today's session, along with the sign-in sheet. So if you are looking for ACRP or SOCA credit, and we're just going to email those out to everybody that's in the attendance. So that's why it's so important for you to have your name in your Zoom box for us. The other thing is we are offering continuing education credits. So thank you to Michelle and Amy for providing us those documents that we need for our continuing education office. Kylie is going to actually drop the continuing education form toward the end of the presentation. So you'll just need to download that and then send it back to me to get those CEs. I do have a very important announcement about that CE form. It has to be received today by your end of business, because I know that we have some individuals across the United States. It is the end of our fiscal year, so we have to have that invoice and everything to the CE office by then. So I see a message where, can anybody confirm that you're able to hear me?
I can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay. Could you?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you type a message? Okay. So once again, I apologize for the short notice with the CE forms, but we do have to have them back today. Like I said, by your end of business. Now, if you ask Shelley Welch, my end of business is midnight sometimes if I have to work on something. So as long as it's in my inbox come Monday morning at 5 a.m., we can take those. So I do want to introduce our presenters today. And before I do that, let me go ahead and share our slides with you and get that started. So just taking a moment here to do a couple things in the room here. Okay. So one, as you have questions, if you have questions, if you have what Amy said to me, if you have a burning question, or if you're like me and you might be a little older and you think you're going to forget what your question was, feel free to put it in the chat as she's talking. Myself and Kylie will be watching the chat. So if it's a burning question that we need to put in, we will definitely do that. Speaking here to my right is Amy Sponhotz. She's our Quality Assurance Auditor for CTSI, for Clinical Trials Center of Excellence. She has over 20 years experience in the life science and healthcare industry, with 10 years in quality and regulatory experience in the pharmaceutical industry. We'll talk later of how you were there for that long. And then she also has been with CTSI here for 18 months. And Michelle Chittister is the Assistant Director of Regulatory and Quality at CTSI as well. She's with our Center of Excellence. And then she has over 20 years experience in research and has been at CTSI for 8 years. We also have Annie Orovitz. She's our Compliance and Remediation Coordinator. Just for the record, she's off camera, so you can't see her. She may have chose her seat strategically. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Amy to go ahead and get us started today.
Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate that.
Thank you all for spending your Friday afternoon with us. I know this is going to be an exciting session to get you geared up for your exciting weekend. So today we want to talk about inspection readiness, best practices for managing clinical trial inspections. And just a brief overview of what we'll be talking about today. We're going to talk about common preparation strategies, understanding what will be accessed at the site for compliance when an external audit occurs, and to verify the accuracy, reliability, and integrity of clinical and non-clinical trial data submitted to the FDA. Also to assess compliance with the FDA's regulations governing the conduct of clinical and non-clinical trials, including regulations for informed consent and ethical review. So let's define some common preparation strategies. So first, we want to communicate with all the staff involved in the audit. And then you want to read your local and/or your sponsor standard operating procedures on how to prepare for an audit. Here at the COE, we have one of those SOPs, and it'll be included in your resources at the end, just so you can kind of read over it and maybe compare with your local SOP. Also, you want to familiarize yourself with the responsibilities during the audit and understand the purpose and the process of the audit. So when you gather together to kind of strategize about how you're going to attack this review for your audit, you definitely want to have your SOP at the ready and understand the purpose and process of the audit. Is this a routine audit, which is when the auditors just come in to assess compliance and patient safety, or is it for cause audit where there was a specific action that brought them to come to your facility? And sometimes there are pre-site and there are closeouts, but most of you probably will have a routine audit, hopefully. So employee guidelines during the audit processes. So this are some do's and don'ts, and please don't worry about taking notes. We will provide some employee guidance and checklists to help you go through your audit readiness. So it's important to make yourself or a qualified designate readily available upon the request of the auditor. Remain available during the entire time of the visit in case additional questions or information is needed. And be cooperative and polite. Make precise, concise, and honest statements. Be sure that you understand the question that's posed by the auditor prior to replying and ask for clarification if needed. Be cooperative, but do not volunteer information. Discuss only those items or trials identified on the audit agenda and allow the auditor time to take notes during the conversation. So when you're notified from the auditor, they will let you know when they're coming. They will also let you know what items they want to look at. So you should have all of that information. And it's very important not to volunteer any extra information because you really don't want the auditors to go looking into another trial or another section. So just stick with the information that they've provided and only answer those questions. Again, only answer the questions that are relevant to your job duties or study involvement. If you don't know the answer, just say that you don't, or find someone that can answer the question. It's all right if you don't know the answer. It's better to be honest and say you don't know than to try to give them an answer that isn't correct. Make sure you're professional at all times. Please don't chew gum. No inappropriate conversation. Don't interrupt or argue with the inspector. And just make sure that your appearance is clean and professional at all times. And also keep confidential information filed away and offices neat. We don't want to give them any other areas to look into. Excuse me. I think we're stuck.
You're stuck?
Yeah. Okay,
Oh,
there we go. And then provide documentation as requested by the auditor to the audit lead or the designate in a timely manner. So you want to do that prior to the audit so they have all the information ready. For regulatory agency audits, interview or meet with the auditor only if the audit lead or designate is present. So your lead will let you know if you're going to meet with the auditor. And again, answer all questions truthfully and to the best of your ability. And then some things not to do. So don't keep the auditor waiting. Do not provide confidential records. So no salary records, personnel. Don't interrupt the auditor when they're talking or asking a question. And don't be defensive. You don't withhold any information. Don't argue or complain about any other parties involved, the sponsor or the IRB. You just want to be positive in all interactions with your auditors or your external auditors. Please don't use your cell phone during the interaction. Please either shut it off or mute it. Don't provide any gifts to the auditors. We like cookies and all of those things, but we don't want anything provided for us. This could be interpreted as coercive. So don't even offer refreshments, water, or lunch. You can point them in the direction of and somewhere to grab water, lunch, or the restrooms. Do not provide documentation directly to the auditor without prior permission from the audit leader designate. Again, kind of stress that you make sure everything passes through your department before the auditors review it. And who are we going to notify when an external audit occurs? So want to notify the sponsor if the FDA is involved, your local IRB, your IRB of record if it's not local oversight, your principal investigator, and sub-investigators. Also, we want to notify your investigational pharmacy, laboratories, medical records, administration, Office of Sponsored Programs, Internal Audit Office, legal counsel, and if your academic center has oversight from a specific department. And the next step, we want to make sure that there's a comprehensive review of the following items. And I would just suggest that you create an Excel spreadsheet with all of these items and with participant IDs so that as you go through your review, if you do happen to find an issue, you can document that on your spreadsheet, write the action that you need to take, and then you're able to check that off to make sure you're ready for the audit. I think to try to correct issues as you're reviewing would be very difficult. I think it would be more efficient just to put them in a spreadsheet and then take care of those afterwards. So we're going to review the study procedures, the protocol, CVs for all study personnel, and the CVs should be up to date with qualifications required for study duties. And also they should be signed and dated on the first page. And most external agencies like to see that date within 2 years to make sure your qualifications are still up to date. Patient information sheets and informed consent forms, case report forms and queries, and source data, including medical records. You also want to review your protocol deviations and corrective and preventative actions, your serious adverse events, and then your site file, your patient notes, pharmacy and drug records, signed financial documents, receipts, pharmacy agreements, documentation relating to doses and dispensing. So we also want to review qualifications and training of the trial team members, and then meet with the support team to monitor audit preparation, identify issues to address, and take corrective actions as required. There's some general things just to ensure the applicable SOPs are available and list all personnel and responsibilities delegated and provide evidence of study related training for all study personnel. So one of the preparation strategies is I would go ahead and make sure that you have all SOPs copied and available, your local SOPs or SOPs that are related to the study. In the event that the auditors want to look at those, you won't have to scramble to make copies. You can just provide them with all of the rest of your information. And then it's always good to make sure you have your delegation of duties list so that you have all of your study personnel together. And again, that you're not kind of scrambling at the last minute to find things for the auditors. So, and the delegation of duties log, the investigators are responsible for ensuring that any study personnel to whom a task is delegated is qualified by education, training, and experience, and state licensure where relevant to perform the delegated task. And each study-specific task that study personnel performs should be noted in the delegation duties log. So it's kind of a roadmap for your auditor, the delegation of duties log. It lets them know who's on the study. It also lets them look through while they're reviewing your study to ensure that their start date happened before they actually participated in any of the participant studies, consent forms, anything like that. So that's very important to make sure that you have your delegation of duties log. And another piece that might be helpful as you prepare and you have auditors in the office is just to prepare a list of participants. That way, if they've randomized and asked for just a few and they seem to want to look at a few others, you can pull up your list and have it easily available to list all your participants, their ID numbers, when they were consented, and the medical record numbers. So they may ask to look at the EMR, and this way you'll have all of that information ready and you will be able to open it and navigate through it, as you won't give your external auditor access to the EMR, but you can give them copies and you can navigate through the system. So then we want to move on to organizing your regulatory files by general headings and arranged in chronological order. So your protocol, make sure you have your signed, dated, and approved protocol, all versions and amendments. The same with your investigator brochure, your form FDA 1572 or investigator agreement, and then CVs for PI and sub-investigators listed on all versions of your FDA form 1572 and investigator agreement. So some other things you'll need to have in order are your approval letter, the initial approval letter and the initial protocol with the original informed consent form. Also, any amendment approvals with approved informed consent, and your informed consent forms, all originals for enrolled participant, informed consents for screened subjects. And just make sure that you have status reports for your yearly renewals, your serious adverse events and adverse events, deaths, study hold or termination, and final summary. Also, we want to ensure that your training records are current and complete. So the protocol training, good clinical practice, human subject protection, trainings pertinent to the study, testing procedures, laboratory procedures, and excuse me, this is an area that you want to make sure you review. I'm sure that your regulatory office may have a study matrix that shows where people are in their expiry for their trainings. So you just want to make sure that everyone that is on your study that is still included is in compliance and their trainings are up to date. Then you want to make sure that all of your communication is in order. So any correspondence you may have from your sponsor, your CRO, IRB, and your monitoring log should be ready to be reviewed. And as well as your laboratory. So your laboratory certifications and normal ranges, and any logs that would include the investigational product, accountability, receipt, dispensing, and return. And also your completed CRFs for each participant enrolled and your source documents for each participant enrolled. And also, if you are entering those into your electronic data capture, make sure that your source documents and your EDC are complete and that they match. The source documents for each subject enrolled, the document that should document the following. So your medical history of subjects at time of entry into the study, all your inclusion, exclusion criteria are met, your eligibility determination and sign off, your concomitant medications, and clinical assessments of the subject during the course of the study. And again, just making sure that all of these are in the EDC as well. And also you'll review your laboratory reports, diagnostic tests, dose modifications, SAEs or AEs, your protocol and subject deviations, early termination, and patients lost to follow-up, patients still in study. So these will all need to be reviewed for completeness. And again, if you were to find any issues, record those so that can be corrected before the audit. So things to consider after you've done your review. And some of the things that we see commonly in quality are consents and eligibility. So they seem fairly straightforward, but as you're reviewing your consents for your audit, make sure that you go into your regulatory file and make sure that your consents and eligibility are on the proper version, and also that your consents have the IRB approval watermark at the bottom. If you were to find an issue with your consent, you can always do a corrective action to make sure the auditor understands what happens. People make mistakes. Sometimes the consent may have been effective on a certain date and you have printed the wrong form. As long as you make that correction and detail it, the auditor will be able to understand what happened. And that also leads into corrections. Anytime that we make corrections, we just want to make sure we're doing them in a manner that is in line with Alcoa. We throw Alcoa Plus around a lot, and we think that everyone should understand what we mean when we say that. So we'll talk about that a little bit just to ensure that you're making your corrections in the right way. So Alcoa Plus principles. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about them. They're attributable, which means it identifies who recorded the data and when. So this means your signature, the date, your initials or the date, or if you are in an electronic system that your username is being used by you to be attributable. And then there's legible. All data can easily be read and understood. And this is the thing that I found difficult for me on some delegation of duties logs. Sometimes people are signing things very quickly, and auditors do look at the signatures and do match them up on CRF documents. So make sure that all of your entries are legible. And then contemporaneous, entries reported in real time. Make sure when you are doing the entry that you date it in that real time, and that there is not you just don't want to have anything happen. So sometimes people may forget to put the date on there, and they'll go back and correct that. But if you just review your documents just for a few seconds before you finish, you'll make sure that you get all of your entries recorded in real time. And then original. It's the first record and no transcription. So you may be busy, you're on a bunch of studies, you're in clinic, you're seeing participants, and you don't have the right form. So you've grabbed a piece of paper or you've grabbed a sticky note and you've written all over it. This is now considered the original record. So you can't throw this away. You can put it in the binder, or you can write up something that's a little more legible if you want to, but that is the original document. So make sure that you put that in the participant's binder. And then that it's accurate. The data represents your observations or your facts. Complete. Entries are up to date with units. So anytime you're doing any measurement or vitals, make sure that the units that you're using are recorded so everyone understands. And then available. It can be reviewed at any time. So is it stored in a place or a manner where everyone that needs to have access can access it, whether it's a system or software, and that it's always available. And that it's consistent, chronologically arranged, signed, and dated. And that's enduring. It exists for the entire study period. So if anyone needs to go in and review someone's EDC, or if they need to pull a participant binder, that they will be able to pull it, and that it's available for the entire length of the study. So the FDA has, as we all know, several regulations and guidelines that may not always seem to be straightforward, and they are open to interpretation. But I would definitely make sure that you understand the FDA guidelines for informed consent. This guidance is intended to assist institutional review boards, clinical investigators, and sponsors in complying with the FDA's informed consent regulations for clinical investigation. Go back to that one more time. And kind of my parting comment too is also for informed consent, you want to make sure that you understand the electronic informed consent and the CFR for that as well. So we will have these listed in the end of the presentation if you need to take a look at those. We're talking about corrections and issues. We just wanted to move along and give you all a few minutes to look at a case study to see if there are any issues that you think would need to be addressed. So Debbie, we could probably give them however much time you think.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we're only at 2:30.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll give them, let's say, 4 minutes, and then what I'll do is, sometimes I say, are you done? And if not, then we can give them 2 more minutes.
Okay. So if you just take a look at that and let us know if you think there are any issues.
All right, that was 4 minutes. I see a lot of stuff in the chat, so I think I'm gonna turn it back over to Amy. And just in case someone can't see the chat, we'll call out what's in the chat.
Okay.
Okay? Yeah. By we, I mean Amy.
Yeah, you know, it is Friday afternoon after all.
It is.
Okay, so Erica, let's see. Staff role, not duties. Okay, missing info and signatures, legibility. Stop date for Adam is prior to start date, excellent. Years are not fully written out. Okay.
Yeah.
And what is 7 other? Good job, Jane, for picking up on that one.
Just other duties as
Yes,
a
other
side.
duties as a side. Difference between coordinator and research coordinator role. Number 7. Yep, everybody is picking up on it. Protocol title looks incomplete. Absolutely. Stop date. PID missing from first name. Yeah, you guys. Pagination, good job. Whoever picked that one up. That always seems to be one auditors are looking for.
So what do you mean by pagination?
So when your numbering is on your page, you want to make sure that all of your page numbers are there, one of whatever. So one of, if you have 4 pages, one of 4. Those are very important to make sure that you have all of your pages numbered so that we know that this document is all together. So good pickup on that.
Yeah. Demi, you're correct. If the study is ongoing, you will usually number those pages at the end of the study if it's a document that can continue to be added onto and updated. So that is a correct statement.
Thanks, Michelle.
The other thing that I noticed is the PI's name is Dr. Smith. So that could be any Dr. Smith. It should be his complete name, just not his last name and the word and the title doctor.
Correct.
I think Demi had another comment, and if you guys said it, I apologize. I tuned out for a second. It was around the military style of the date. So I just wanted to see if one right there, if one of you could address that.
So is military style date required to ensure you know month, first day? Annie, I'm going to let you pick on this
I
one.
think as long as we're just consistent with our dating throughout, that's what matters.
We have seen it in several different ways on the delegation of duties log, but as long as it's consistent, or if it's written like that with 2022, or if it's written in what we like to see is,
So this delegation log does not indicate what the format is for the date, but many delegation logs that I've seen, especially in industry trials, there will be in quotations the way that they want the date formatted. A lot of times it may be like 11, the initials for the abbreviation for the date, and then the year. So in this case it would be 11 Mar 2022. So if on the delegation log it does indicate a format that they desire the date to be written in, that would be the correct way to date the document. It's important when you're having people complete your delegation log that they're looking to see if there is a requested format. And it would be an error if it's not written correctly, but you could correct that using a note to file.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. Did anyone else have any other comments or questions? Just exit out of that.
Yeah, just exit.
Then we will just look at one more example.
Yep.
All right. So thanks everybody for your comments and the chat. I don't know that I will read all of these, but obviously sticky notes are never a good idea and really should not be in any of your records. So the sticky note is covering the vitals, and also the vitals don't have any units recorded on them, and we can't see what is under the sticky note. So that's obviously an issue. The chest x-ray wasn't filled in. Obviously the medications were not completed as they were completed on the sticky note. And then on the date, the month or the day actually was crossed through, and then it was corrected. But the proper way to correct that is to actually put a line through the entire date, write it again, and then initial and date it. And you are right about the participants' initials. They were scribbled through, and there was no correction. There was nothing to let you know that that was corrected. And I can't see the top of the.
Yeah. There was one more comment, sorry, after you kind of started.
Okay.
Liz's comment, her comment is, would the sticky note count as quote unquote the source?
It would.
It would. This
It would.
one is, I think Amy's comment was you shouldn't be using sticky notes
Right.
to document.
You shouldn't use them to document, but unfortunately in this instance, it is the source, so it will need to stay in the participants binder.
So you may want to be really nice to your regulatory staff, since they're ones that have to now keep track of that sticky note, as a former regulatory person.
And yes, someone had made the comment, is that a 7 or a 1? And that's a good point, because it's a little hard to know. And sometimes when we're auditing things, it is difficult for us to ascertain, but if a few of us come up with the same the number, we usually know what it is. But again, that all kind of sinks back to being legible. I know people are in a hurry when they're using pen and paper and they're quickly writing and signing things. So just take a minute to realize that everything that you document, especially when you're handwriting it, or even when it's electronic, someone else is going to have to decipher later if you leave the study, if there's a question and you're gone. So anything that you do that's documented should be clear and concise, and anything that you correct should let an auditor understand what happened. Sometimes it's easy to see, oh, they just wrote the wrong day or the wrong month, or there's a date discrepancy somewhere. So maybe we need to have a note to file or a longer explanation with more detail, because you want your auditor, if they see this information, then to immediately see the corrective action that was put into place and what happened, so that doesn't cause them to dig a little deeper into some other file.
I worked with a sponsor at one point that they had us sign they had their own form for signatures, capturing signatures, your initials at the very beginning of the study. They even made us write our numbers from 0 to 9. so that they could potentially go back. I'm not, and that was not very common, and I worked there for like 17 years, so.
I mean, it is sometimes difficult, and auditors do use the delegation of duties to make sure that signatures match. Even in the EDC, we look to see if signatures match what's on the delegation log. So if you're having a mild personality change day, make sure your signatures match. Sometimes you're just making a scribble because you're in a hurry, and sometimes you know really nice, but just whatever you put on that delegation of duties log, please make sure that's what's in your documentation so it matches.
To your point, Debbie, about the signature and the number verification, we do at WVCTSI collect a document with numbers written on it so that we have that if an auditor would request it.
And I think to Amy's point, I know you said signature, but the same with your initials, how you sign that form, as you all may know. I actually got questioned on an audit because somebody came in after me, and they decided for whatever reason, and Michelle, I don't know who approved this, they just did DL. So then they were questioning because mine was DCL. So.
Yes. Thanks, Michelle. So, and just to kind of talk a little bit about corrections again, just in the proper form, just make sure you correct the error without obscuring the original data to maintain an audit trail. Initial and date the corrections at the time that they were made, and add a brief statement for the change if the reason is not clearly evident. We kind of just went over that, but just again, make sure that you don't obscure the original data, because that makes you question things too. Why is it so scribbled through that we can't read what happened? So in conclusion, we just went over talking about preparation strategies, understanding what's going to be accessed for compliance, to verify the accuracy, reliability, and integrity of your data, and then to assess if you are within compliance. So again, when you're notified of an audit, get together with your team, make sure you go through all of the steps to get prepared, review your data, correct any issues that you may find, make sure everyone is notified, and make sure that you do kind of follow the do's and don'ts list of what to do when your auditor is there. And I don't think that I included this, but make sure when your auditor or auditors come to your site that you have reserved a conference room or a room away from everyone where they can be locked down, so to speak, since they are going to have participant data in their area, and then make sure that you're readily available either close to the room or via phone or text in case they do have questions or they do need additional information, so that they can ascertain what they need to do, and that you're close by so you can bring it to them. So we do have some guidances and resources here on here. We also do have our SOP for our audit readiness at the CTSI COE. So if you want to look at that and see how it compares with yours, or if there are any items that you want to use to help prepare you for your audit, feel free to use those. We are also will include, when Debbie sends out your information, we have a checklist and we have kind of a do's and don'ts. So you can take those and use them however you would like to help prepare for your next audit.
And what we might do, just had a thought. I know I have a lot, is we might just take that link and just send you to that website. So you're welcome to download that off of that.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Okay. Sorry. I didn't discuss that with Amy before.
That's all right.
Okay.
All right. So thank you very much. Thanks for spending your Friday afternoon with us. And please reach out to Quality if you need anything. We're here to provide customer service, process improvement, and we are not Darth Vader. So please call us if you need us.
So thank you. Please don't drop. If you need continuing education credits, Kylie just dropped the form. So please make sure you grab that if you're wanting those. So sorry, just wanted to make sure. I was afraid people were going to drop and not get that form. Amy and Michelle and even Annie, who's off camera, thank you so much for coming today. And we really appreciate, because for those that haven't sat across the table yet from an auditor, I would much rather have my internal team come in and look at all my documents, get them in order. Now, I'm not gonna say that auditors still not gonna find stuff, but I don't know, I just always felt more secure when I already had an internal audit. So, so thank you for sharing your years of knowledge with our staff here. We really appreciate that. I know Kylie put it, but once again, you're in the business today. I do need to receive your continuing education form, so. All right, any questions or anything from anybody? You have been muted upon entry, but you're welcome to unmute yourself. There's something in the chat. We're getting a lot of thank you, great presentation in the chat box. All right, hearing nothing, I'm going to go ahead and end. Thank you all. Have a great